I think AI definitely is a industry disruptor in data. The amount or when exactly it's going to disrupt to the level that it's touted, I think is what remains to be seen. But in BI and in analytics, something I touched on earlier, the top thing that we're trying to eliminate is friction for someone to get an answer that they need. That's the number one thing.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Brill, founder and CEO of Scalable Associates, a firm that specializes in implementing business intelligence and data warehousing solutions for healthcare practices, ultimately helping them grow and scale and have the insights and to build the confidence to make the right decisions to grow their practice. With me today is Wesley Layton, Director of Operations at Scalable Associates, a ton of background in implementing tools like Tableau, Power BI, different data warehousing solutions. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. So to get started, Wesley, you spent a lot of time in the healthcare space, both on the insurance side and consulting, and now building technologies out for providers. Over that time, what are some of the trends you're seeing, that are taking place right now in the work that you're doing with BI? What's being implemented, and what's some of the background of the reasons why?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, whenever I first got into the data realm and like really working in data roles, I think that it was a lot less accessible to end users at that time. There was typically a lot of manipulation that went into it. You had to have somebody creating an Excel file or pulling data from all these different systems to put it into a single Excel workbook and then sending that out. And once that data was sent out, you had a number that you could kind of go off of. Let's say if you're tracking cash collections at a clinic or something like that, that clinic manager can see, okay, well, here's my cash collections for the current month. But that was about it, right? Because it was just so manual and tedious to put those numbers together. But in the recent years, I think kind of just really making that data open and making those insights just more frictionless, less friction to get to them, has become huge. So even the frontline and operations staff has access to so much more data with the organizations that we're working with today than they used to. You don't have to have an entire financial team or data team or report writers putting this stuff together. You can work with a data services company like us, or maybe you have it in-house or whatever that looks like. And we're able to build data models and reports in a way that you can kind of lead the horse to the water in a sense, and make that data accessible for the end user in a way that they have what matters to them, and they can see the detail behind it to a level that is meaningful to them. So like if we were going off of the collections example and you're a clinic manager, they could see like the actual staff and what they're collecting. And maybe there is a certain copay with a type of insurance or payer that's coming in that they're not collecting on each time, and they can actually drill into that and see that. Or maybe it's a certain staff that's not collecting copays as much, and they can talk through scripting with that staff and things like that. So that's been a huge trend. And I think it's kind of taken for granted in a way almost, because there's so much of the buzz around AI and everything else, which is awesome. And I'm sure we'll talk about that some, but just if you take a step back and think of all the data that we have accessible and how we can make that available for you end users and for these like operators, I think the technology's come such a long way. And just even within the past 5 to 10 years, and how we're able to serve that up.
Yeah. I'm interested because you mentioned the Excel spreadsheets, and honestly, I was just at a conference, and a group who I won't name by name, but a group that has grown rapidly. There are over 40 locations now, and that growth and expansion was very quick. They're still operating from spreadsheets. They're still copying data out of different platforms, whether it's their HR system or their practice management software. So that's very real of what's happening on kind of still using the manual tools and so on. So what are some of the more advanced practices that have implemented best practices? What are they doing exactly? And, you talked a little bit about friction even with getting access to data. So what are the best practices doing right now? And what was that friction? Is that friction still there? And what can somebody do about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I think whenever I take a step back and look at, all the organizations that I've worked with, the best practices are the ones that are making the data available to their staff in a way that makes sense to them, and they can actually know what they're being measured on, and they have the insight to see like how they're doing on what they're being measured on. So what I mean by that is some of the practices that we're working with really dive into like persona based scorecards and reporting for their staff. So if you're a clinic manager, then there's like a clinic manager scorecard where you can see for your clinic, how am I doing on cash collections? How am I doing on front end related denials, like related to eligibility, and these different, how am I doing on my door to door time? Like these different metrics that they have direct impact over, and it's what matters to them. But then you give them the access to that and they can see how they're tracking and trending on that. And then, like I said, there's kind of this next layer that you also give them access to through, this is all through dashboarding and things like Power BI or Tableau, any of those tools. But you give them the next layer of dashboard where they're able to then see what's driving those things. Because for every metric, there's multiple factors that can drive it. So you have to give them the ability to see what is driving it and how they can make changes based off of it.
But aren't most of these persona dashboards, aren't these things available in the PM system or the practice management system already? If best practice is getting Power BI and Tableau, what else is going in there? Like, why is it not already in the host systems that they're using today?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, there's a couple different variables that impact, like, the efficiency of host system reporting for this kind of stuff. So, number one, with a lot of host systems, it's export files that you have to still manipulate to get it in the format that practices want to be able to look at these types of high level KPIs. So even to get like a copay collection rate, if you think of that, a lot of the host system reporting might give you copay collections, but then you would still have to export that and manipulate it to get what's the rate of copay collections, like what was my available appointment. So then you're joining multiple host system reports together. That gets manual and tedious. And then the other component is actually pulling in other systems. So going back to the example that we're talking about, clinic scorecard, copay collection data might be in your host system, but what is probably not in your host system is Google reviews, and Net Promoter Score might not be in there, depending on what system you're using for that. These other things that you want to tie into that to show how they're tracking on patient satisfaction as well. Payroll data, HR data for time and attendance too. So with a tool like Power BI or Tableau, you have the ability to connect to all these different systems and create one common data platform for your team that centralizes that for them.
You mentioned a lot about what I would call practice operations and some rev cycle and financial, just through Net Promoter Score and some of the collections by location, copay collection rates, and so on. Who's the hungriest right now for data and information? What's the persona that's kind of driving most of the conversations and questions that you interact with?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the answer is a lot of people are hungry for data. So it's several different personas, but I'll tell you, in the past, I feel that it has always, like, the stereotype or the common thread is, the finance team is always the most data hungry. And if you're a reporting person like me, then you're very used to, supplying finance team with data for them to be able to do Excel analysis and things like that. I'd say as industry changes and it becomes more data driven, it seems to me that more and more operators and operations staffs are becoming data savvy and knowing that they need to use data to actually measure operations and how things are improving. So I've seen so much more practice operations requests and data requests coming from that side than maybe there used to be. I think RCM is a very, if your RCM or billing team, that's always been a more data driven component of healthcare, just because there's so much volume of claims and billing and so many failure points to manage. They'll always have a need for data. Finance, like I said, has always had a need for data, but that operations team is a growing end user of the data solutions that are out there.
It's fascinating to hear that so finance is obviously going to be a key driver, and they're usually the ones that are in the spreadsheets that then can say, okay, I need to navigate to something more automated. And so then kind of on the peripheral where you have practice operations, maybe even marketing, to try to grow that new patient base, and clinical even. I mean, I feel like clinical has there's a lot of like bolt-on apps, and there's a lot of different technologies out there. But just from like when I use the term hunger for information or data, I feel like that is going to come very fast and rapidly from CMOs in the very near future, and that's probably a big, I don't want to say void, but it just like is a level of investment in external reporting solutions, meaning not within the EMR PM or and more advanced than and customized than what's in there. I see that on the horizon. So, I mean, with that, so there's all these different platforms. You mentioned Net Promoter Score, PM system, all these different things, HRIS system, even to like pull this information together. If a practice is growing and interested in building the infrastructure, what are some of the personas or what are some of the roles and responsibilities that you need? What about the technologies? Healthcare is notorious for acronyms, right? Like, oh, like, like DSO and CPT and all the different items that, we use, but the data industry is the same. So there's, ELT and ETL, there's APIs, Snowflake and Fabric and all these other tools that are popping up. What do I need to think about if I have a practice, I'm growing, I want to harness my own data, I want to aggregate it together. What people do I need on staff or to, fill through agencies, and what technology do I need to think about?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think a lot of it depends on the size of your practice. That's what we found, at least. So I'll kind of expand on that. There's a few different domains within data, kind of like you said. There's different domains within healthcare. Within a typical healthcare organization, you have like finance and clinical and operations, and they're all working together. In data, we have much the same way, kind of cross-functional roles and teams that work together to deliver a data product. One of those is data engineering. And so that's where the acronym of the ELT, extracting, loading, and transforming, comes into place. That might be more reserved for you, where you would need a specific data engineer if you're a little bit of a larger organization and you have a lot of data to work with. And so what I mean by that is typically a data engineer is connecting to all of your various source systems, creating pipelines to ingest that data either nightly or on some sort of recurring basis, and then centralizing it into an enterprise data warehouse for you that you can then create those common reports off of, like we're talking about. So they're really like the bones, kind of like the plumbing of that data platform that you're creating. Sometimes if you're a smaller organization, you might be able to get away with bypassing that role and having a business intelligence developer, which is kind of the next role, fulfilling some of that by connecting straight to those source systems and skipping that warehousing layer that we're talking about. That warehousing layer is really important if you have a lot of data, because you have to process it in a more systematic way and a performant way to be able to get the data into your reporting platform. So the next role, the BI developer, business intelligence developer, they're the ones that are actually going to kind of create the final product that you see. So they're going to work with your data engineer once that data is loaded into a data warehouse, and they're going to model the data into a way that makes sense to be ingested by whatever tool that you're using. And so for Power BI, it would be, one way, and for Tableau, it might be another way. So, you kind of look for people with experience in the tool, that whatever you might be going with. That BI developer then connects to the modeled data, creates your dashboards. They're going to be working with you as a business user to understand what your requirements are. That's actually, so if you're kind of like a mid practice, a smaller practice, you might could get away with that. But what we found is once you continue to grow, your requests get more complex. You actually really need a business analyst or even project manager to kind of interface between the BI developer and the business, because those requirements just get so intricate of what you're needing, and they're so custom tailored to the business. You need someone that can talk the language of both. So someone that can go and meet with your operating staff and understand things whenever you're talking through like initial denial rates and successful appeal rates and how to create the reporting around that. But they can then go and talk to the BI developer and relay those business requirements in a way that makes sense to be able to build out the logic for it in the reporting. That's three roles right there, I would say, of data engineer, business intelligence developer, and then like a business analyst or project manager that really acts as kind of the extension of the business within the data team.
Yeah. So let's say that I'm one of the practices that's on the smaller side or the up and coming, and I want to dip my toe into the water of in-housing my data visualization, my dashboarding, my alerts and subscriptions, and all the things that those tools can provide. I have an analyst in my business. They're an Excel guru. They're so good at turning out the reports. They know my business. Can I just take, since I don't need a data warehouse, can I just take that data and put it into a dashboard? Are they going to have the right tools and skills to, start implementing this?
Yeah. So it's a good question because it's something we see a lot. There's a difference we've found with someone who's data savvy and then someone who can implement a great data product for an organization. And that's not a knock on either one. They're just different skill sets. So someone can be really good at analyzing data in Excel and creating, these different financial revenue cycle operations reports and things, and are very good with numbers. That's not necessarily the same thing as being able to create an awesome data platform for your organization. And so the thing about creating like a data platform and business intelligence platform in your organization is it's almost like you're creating a product that's being consumed by end users, because that really is what it is. You're serving something up and you're providing it to people. You're fulfilling a need of theirs. So the best data teams and the best data people act almost like product people as well, of trying to understand what is the pain point of that user. How can we build something that gives them the most frictionless experience to be able to get the answers that they need? How do they interface with it? How do we iterate on it and continue to improve it? So it's not just a number crunching type of function, which I think is a common like misconception with the data team, but it's actually, how do we create something scalable? How do we create something that is going to be able to fulfill a lot of different types of needs and issues? And how do we use the best technology that's out there to do it? Because there's so many different ways to do it nowadays. And you really have to stay up to date on the technology and trends to make sure you're building and staying and remaining competitive with it, really.
Yeah. So what's interesting is it sounds like when we have, let's say, a resource and hey analyst, I need a production report by provider so we can do our provider count modeling. That just being able to fulfill that doesn't necessarily mean that that individual has the technical skill set to build a comprehensive data model or best practice visualizations or even the
Yeah.
warehousing and so on. So that all makes sense. And then you said it's more like building a product. I'm a care provider at the core of my business. I'm not a product organization. So, the concept of sprints and a ticketing system, even like help desk, just general inquiries on which dashboard do I go? What is this KPI? What's the source of it? All these things that would go in line with a product. Why wouldn't I just isn't there just some off the shelf solution that can integrate all this together and does exactly what I need it, however I need it? Like, why am I building this inside of my own business?
Yeah, it'd be awesome if there was a silver bullet off the shelf platform like that. I think there's a lot out there that cover a good amount of bases. So there's a lot of off the shelf analytics data products. What is interesting though is almost all of them you're still going to have to do some amount of wrangling no matter what for your organization, because there are going to be operational ways that you're using your system or that cause the data to be different, or there's going to be special carve outs that you need to do, or there's going to be incentive tracker that you're running for your clinics that you're going to have to still wrangle that data. So with any off the shelf product, there's going to be an amount of wrangling of the data, and there's going to be some sort of manual effort still, just with the way that healthcare organizations work. There's going to be something that goes into it to be able to get the reporting that you want. So the only way to really eliminate the data wrangling from staff that could be spending time providing care or improving care or billing claims and following up on claims, the only way to eliminate that from their job function really is to bring in your own data team or work with an outsourced data team. But either way, you need something that's internal to your company. that knows your business and knows your challenges and your current strategies that you're tracking, because they're going to be the ones that can align the product to the product. In this case is a reporting platform. They can align that to where you're trying to head as a business. So we talk about something sometimes when we first work with clients of strategic goals, and then the operational metrics that drive those goals, and then the kind of daily metrics that drive the operational metrics. So it's kind of like this pyramid approach of metrics, which is fairly common if you're looking at, how to run a data driven organization. That's like a common approach. But you probably have 3 to 5 strategic goals as a company that you're focusing on at a time. Of maybe you want to grow your visits, maybe you want to increase revenue, increase patient care. There's these different areas, and each of them are kind of in their own function. The only way to really get something that perfectly integrates with that is to build your own data product that can report on how you're tracking on those, because you have your own strategic metrics, and they change and they grow and so on and so forth. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's, the only way to really eliminate it to really eliminate manual wrangling is to bring in some sort of data team to build that out for yourself on your own instance.
So I've been to many organizations, and the level of customization between each of them is pretty significant. And especially when you think about like provider compensation models, you're talking about KPIs and goals that are unique or top priority for the organization this calendar year. So how do you prioritize them and distribute those, OKRs even, but distribute that type of information out to disseminate through the organization through all levels in that pyramid approach. So yeah, a lot of benefit of just having it internal. The other thing is that I've noticed, it doesn't matter what technology it is. Obviously it could be as simple as something like QuickBooks and your basic GL accounting system, all the way up to your hyper complex EMR. But you got to wait for releases and updates and sprint cycles. And sometimes you're waiting, and sometimes your idea or your thought or whatever you need in your business is a ways out. It's on the list, but it's not going to be until the sprint in Q4. And so, you avoid some of that turnaround time as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, when you can in-house it. So another thought too on internal. I mean, if you're doing speed to value, if you're growing rapidly, it's definitely something you have to consider as a leader in an organization. So I think, obviously hot topic right now, you mentioned it earlier, is AI. And so there's been different things creating buzz in business communities the past few years. I mean, a lot of talk about big data, then a lot of talk about blockchain. How is AI real? Is it really going to actually create change in the healthcare industry? And how is it going to be applied to data? I know it's still kind of unfolding right now, but what do you see in kind of the near future for data and AI?
Yeah, the answer is always a little bit more complex than what article titles might be. But to sum it up, I think AI definitely is a industry disruptor in data. The amount or when exactly it's going to disrupt to the level that it's touted, I think is what remains to be seen. But in BI and in analytics, something I touched on earlier, the top thing that we're trying to eliminate is friction for someone to get an answer that they need. That's the number one thing. The quickest that you can get the most accurate answer to the business means that you're doing your job the best that you can. I think AI is going to be a means for that. So obviously with all of the chat bot models and GPT models that are out there in AI is kind of the biggest disruptor that we've seen recently. And I think it applies to analytics and data as well. With Power BI and with Tableau, they're both investing heavily into making sure that this is a core part of their platform. So if you go with either of those tools in your company, it seems to be pretty clear that they're putting a lot of money and time into that. So you're going to be on the competitive edge if you stay with one of those tools. And what I mean by that, just to give a little bit of clarity whenever I'm talking about all of this, is both of them are integrating AI features to make users able to get those answers quicker. And so the way that it would work is being able to ask a question to your data. So something that Tableau is coming out is Tableau Next, and Microsoft obviously has Copilot integrated deeply in its tech stack. And so you'd be able to ask a question using its chat features and AI of your data. So if you're a clinic manager, you could ask something like, what's the top thing that is impacting my clinic's copay collection rates? And it could tell you, is it a staff member? It could tell you, is it time of day? Is it when are the copay collections dropping off? So it could really kind of isolate that and help you understand, how do I impact change on that metric? So it's that analysis level, which typically, like we talked about earlier, that's a different job function that you really have to keep around than a data engineer or a BI developer. So there's really like an analyst, and the analysts are still going to be around, I think, to answer questions and to put that together, and to even be the ones working with AI on a day-to-day basis. But again, I think just removing that friction from end users from being able to get their answers is the way that AI is going to continue to evolve in the industry.
All right, and so that leads me to my last question around all of this AI buzz and all of these other tools. What's the next step if I want to be on the cutting edge and I'm doing nothing today? What's the first thing I should do to either research this, to find the right solution, to make sure that I'm ready for optimizing my practice for this BI and AI and these different tools that are becoming available?
Yeah. So, I mean, first step obviously is that you need to be thinking about which tool to look into for your practice. You have to have a tool to be on the ship with it as it's continuing to move down the innovation. So, like I mentioned, Tableau, Power BI, those are two that we often recommend, either one of them, depending on your organization and its tech stack. Getting your data into a common platform is going to be key to be able to leverage anything from AI. Obviously, the data needs to be somewhere for that AI agent to interface with. So if you have your data disparate between your HRIS system and your PM system and net promoter score system and all of this different stuff, you're not going to be able to leverage it to its best ability. That's the first thing to look into if your organization is, how do I centralize my data into a common data platform? And then if you're on one of the tools that's continuing to innovate in AI, then you'll be set up for success to utilize it as it continues to improve.
Awesome. Well, that's incredibly insightful. I think, it also leads to potentially some future conversations in more detail about how to actually take that next step, how to implement those things, how to even hire the right resources, questions to ask. So I think this was a good starting point for us to launch into a lot more detail to help practices out and give them some insights. So thanks for your inputs today. Thanks for the time. Great answers to questions, and hopefully this helps the healthcare community. So appreciate it, Wesley.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.